what sport has taught me is that discipline and that hunger to learn, to keep going forward. That you're going to have setbacks, and when I see coaches on the sideline and they're up and down, like highs and lows, and yelling at the refs and down to here, I go, that team is going to be like that. If I was like that, my team's going to be like that.
Bob Turner has quite the resume in the sporting landscape here in Australia. Not bad from a guy who was born in the US and moved here as a young man in 1976. Probably best known in Australia for his work with the Sydney Kings. I was certainly all aboard the Kings bandwagon back in the day. And he talks about how they went about connecting the community. And I can remember what a great job that they did. He's also done heaps more that you probably don't know about. He's also a great storyteller, and I think you're really going to love this one. Bob Turner. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. G'day, Bob. How are you?
Good, Ian. How about yourself?
Really good. Back in 1995, when I was in my final year at uni, we had a sports media course, and I reached out to you. I can't remember why I did. I think the Kings were massive at the time,
They were.
and my memory was that you rang my home after I left a message at the Kings, and I was just blown away by, one, that you rang me as a young fella, and two, just how polite and respectful you were for someone who was clearly out of his depth in what he was doing. And I appreciated that so much at the time. So thank you. And it's great to be interviewing you again now.
It's my pleasure, and obviously your career has gone, up and up, and that's great to see. But from my point of view, it's always, we were building a sport. We weren't just building a club. We were trying to help build a sport, and anybody who had an interest, were worth talking to, because you never knew, who that person was, what they could do, how they could help you, how you could help them. And I always say this country for 48 years has been unbelievable for me. So if I can give back, then that's what it's all about.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. My uni mates were egging me on to ask me some questions about the Kings' fourth quarter struggles, and I went, well, he's giving me his time. I probably won't go for the harsh questions in that
I think
scenario.
it's pretty obvious. Most of those guys wanted to get on a plane the next day and get home.
Yeah, right. That might be another story.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the journey. I read in you just entered the New South Wales Basketball Hall of Fame, and they were telling a lot of your stories around the journey from a basketball perspective. But how is it you end up in Australia in the first place, Bob?
Well, it's funny. I was at college at UC Santa Barbara, and I was a walk-on, which meant I came to college without a scholarship, but I needed a scholarship to pay for my education because my parents weren't that wealthy. So I worked hard. I was a good player, but they just didn't have any scholarships available. So I worked my tail off, and my last year in college, I was captain of the team, starting point guard, and feeling like I had made it a little bit.
Yeah.
Then halfway through the season, our team wasn't going to make the NCAA playoffs, and so my coach thought it would be a good idea to play some of the younger kids to blood them for the next year. So my time went from 30 minutes a game to 10, 15 minutes a game, and I thought I didn't work my tail off to get here, just to stop. And I always wanted to coach. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to stop playing. So happened to come through a former alumni of Santa Barbara looking for a big guy. He was coaching in Australia, and he had two Aussies with him, two of the players from the team. And they sat in my apartment and talked to my roommate, who was 6'10", about Australia and how good it would be, and why don't you come down? And I sat there and listened. And I thought, hey, I want to keep playing. Could I go too?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
said, yeah, well, let me call, and because my credibility was fairly good, and so they made the call back to Shoalhaven, and they said, hey, we got a point guard who wants to come as well. Yeah, bring him over. So in those days, you came over for an airfare, and and a job. So my first year, I made orange juice for the president's company called Orchie, and I thought, well, that's different. But it was an experience, and you got to keep playing, and so it was good fun.
And is this predating the NBL?
Oh yeah, this is 1976. So Shoalhaven was playing in the state league,
Yeah.
which had teams from Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, and
Yeah.
Nara Bomaderry. So the state league was pretty competitive. Um, you know, we played throughout a whole season, um, and our home games. I mean, the first game we played at home, there weren't a lot of people there, and of course, I'd come from college where every game was packed.
Yeah.
And when I first walked into the Bomaderry basketball stadium, I thought, "Whoa, is this where we play or is this where we practice?" Oh,
Yeah.
this is our stadium. Okay, good. And there weren't a lot of people in the crowd,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but I thought to myself, okay, I didn't come all the way over here to play and not have anybody watch the team. And we represented Narra Bomaderry, the Shoalhaven area. So I set out to try and help get some people to come to the games, and that started my kind of marketing background as well as coaching. And the second year I was player coach, which is not an easy thing to do.
At what age?
And the NBL was formed in '79, so this is '76 when I came out.
But
So
what age were you stepping into player coach role though?
24, yeah.
Oh
So
wow.
I was younger than most of my team.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
and then I had also pioneered the position as state director of coaching. So in my association, there was two key people in New South Wales basketball, which was John Hilsinger and John Martin, Bill Hilsinger, sorry, and John Martin. So those two, I kind of said, "Hey, we need a state director of coaching. I think I could do the job. It's what I want to do." So I went to New South Wales basketball, and they gave me the job, and my job was to go out and teach people how to coach basketball and educate people, because back then, basketball was not a core sport by any means. And
Yeah.
even argued, even today, it's not really still a core sport. Um, and the president of New South Wales basketball was a guy named Dr. John Rasky, who was also president of Basketball Australia. And he had this idea of forming a national league, because in those days, you played a 1 week tournament, which was the epitome of the game. And there was no way of promoting your club unless in that capacity. So he developed the National Basketball League. There was 10 teams. Um, he recruited me to come and coach the teams. I was the player coach in 1979. And next door to me, in the desk next to me, was John Gardner, who was the commissioner of the league.
Yeah.
So I had the president, the commissioner, and myself. And so, as a learning curve, it was fantastic, because you're
Wow.
building a league, and what works, what doesn't work. And we set out to fill our stadium, which we did. And my second year, it was too hard to be director of coaching and player coach, so I just played. And they brought a coach in, which worked out that he wasn't all that good. So the next year, I said, "Look, I'm tired of training and playing with everything I'm doing, so I'll just coach." So I became a full time coach for the association, and set about trying to build the Falcons into the biggest and best in the league. So we sold out every game. I even put closed circuit television back on the back courts so we could feel the atmosphere and still buy a ticket.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
things like that back in 1980, 81 was unheard of.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
and
And
so it was good fun, and all the other teams started to do the same and start to promote. Um, and then in '83, the Canberra Cannons were looking for a new coach, and they were playing in a venue that wasn't a tin shed. In those days we played at Alexandria, Condell Park, Nuttawading Stadium.
yeah.
Nobody was playing other than Adelaide in anything that sat more than 1,500 people. So when they called, I went, "Hold on, this is ripe. It's the nation's capital. They got a great venue, good working committee, good core of players." So I went there with the idea that not only would I build the cannons, but we'd own the town. And in that first, it's an interesting story that I don't know if you know the National Indoor Sports Center at Bruce, but it's a oval kind of indoor facility. They used to drop a curtain down halfway into the stadium
Yeah.
and sell tickets in kind of a horseshoe fashion because no one thought we'd ever get more than 1,000 people to a game.
Yeah.
So when I got there, I said, no, 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 let's drop the
Drop the
curtain.
curtain.
Well, that's my goal, to drop the curtain. Oh, you're crazy. That'll never happen. Anyway, about halfway through the season, we dropped the curtain. And, I had brought in Phil Smythe to be my point guard. He was a great, great, probably the best player I ever coached. And Jerry Lee, my old college roommate, he came and played. And so now I knew I had a pretty good squad. And so I took a team that came 10th the year before and built them into a winner. But off the court, we're filling up our stadium, and all of a sudden, we're the pride of Canberra.
Amazing. And you're kind of glossing over the success as you go because you're a humble man. But your first year at the Falcons, first year coaching a national league team. How old were you then?
Well, it was 79, so I was 25.
25, and you win Coach of the Year, and then you go to the Cannons, and then did they win back to back?
Yeah, we won back to back in Canberra.
Yeah.
And it was
Wow.
interesting because I was just telling someone the other day that, when they talk about travel and how difficult it is for players and
Yeah.
keeping motivation. And, we played in the playoffs in 1983. We played Nuttawading at home on a Friday night because you remember all the players were still working jobs.
Yeah.
So we played on a Friday night against Nuttawading, 5,427 people in the stadium. In a stadium, it seats 4,400. So we had standing room only around the top. It was wild.
Yeah.
Got on a plane, flew to Melbourne, drove down to Geelong, played Geelong on Saturday night, won that game, and then the next day drove back to Melbourne and played St Kilda at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. Finished the game, got on the plane, came home, and then went to work the next day. So but you did it because that's what you did. You were getting a chance to play. And then the next week we went back to Melbourne, played I think Coburg on a Friday night, and then on the Sunday we won the championship against West Adelaide with Ken Cole and Andy Campbell, and so we flew back to Canberra. And I've never witnessed this thing before, but there was 1,000 people at the airport cheering us in. Just fantastic. And this is where basketball, no one really knows what basketball is. So the next year we do it again, and we also win the championship in Melbourne. So we fly back again, and again the crowd was unbelievable. And then my third year there, we were going along tracking well, and then we got to the semifinals, and my key player, Herb McGeechan, his dad passed away, and so he flew home for the funeral, as he should have when we told him, "Oh, you got to do it."
Yeah.
But that put a hole in our team, and we lost that game. And then the next year, we're tracking well again, and Andy Campbell, who I had recruited because he's 7'2" and the Australian center, and he was playing exceptionally well for us. And then he did his ACL, and we missed him in the playoffs. So I really believe we could have won 4 in a row.
Yeah. Wow.
Because on the court we were good, but off the court we were flying.
Amazing. It's funny you say that about players now talking about tired and that sort of, because we used to joke. I remember back playing Premier League football, and we used to joke about that too. They think they're tired. Imagine working a full week, training in the evenings, playing in the game, and then the joke was, and then have 40 schooners on the weekend, and then tell us whether you're tired or not.
That's right.
So I'm curious, right? So I've coached since a young age, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. And you mentioned there, you said you just always wanted to coach. So 2 questions is like, do you know where that desire came from? And the second thing is what were the key elements of you actually being able to create success so quickly?
Yeah, I think one, I knew I couldn't play forever, and I was an okay player, but I wasn't a stud by any means.
Yeah.
So I knew coaching is where I wanted to be, And I had two main influences in my life that set me down this path. And one was my high school basketball coach. So I transferred into a new school when I was a year 10, sophomore in high school. And the coach there was a fellow named Skip Mohat, who was actually on crutches. He had polio.
Mhm.
So as a coach, coaching basketball with the on crutches, he couldn't teach you how to, screen and roll. He couldn't teach you how to shoot a jump shot. It just couldn't demonstrate.
Yeah.
But motivationally and psychology wise, he was best in the business, and just unbelievable. What happened is my junior year, my first full year in the school, I made the varsity team. I played in every game. I was the scrapping, hustling defensive point guard, and I scored 7 points all year total.
Wow.
So it wasn't like I was a stud by any means.
Yeah.
So in the off season, I grew another 3 or 4 inches. I worked my tail off at developing, ball handling skills and all the other things that go along with it.
Yeah.
So the next year, I'm now the starting point guard. I'm averaging 20 points a game. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And the night of our first big school tournament, the coach called me in and he said, "Bob, you're not starting tonight." I said, "Whoa, why?" He said, "In fact, I'm thinking of not even having you on the team." And I
What?
was like, "Whoa." And I started to cry, and like I worked
Yeah.
my tail off. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because your attitude changed. You now think you're pretty good, and I don't need that on my team."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Okay, wake up call."
Yeah.
I didn't start that night, but I had more floor burns because I dove for every ball there was. I fought, I scrapped, and that changed my whole life and my whole career because I continued on through the season as a defensive player, but still scoring 20 and doing all the things I had to do. I made tournament teams and stuff, and that was because of that one moment. And then my uncle was a swimming coach. He was an ex-football, All-American football player, gridiron for Cal Berkeley, and he got into coaching. And he was coaching football, but he also coached swimming. And I was a swimmer when I first, when I was young. So I looked at him as another role model who was a coach, a real coach, empathic to his players, understood how to motivate, tactically was good. But so those two guys really taught me those lessons. And then as I went through my career, I always looked at other coaches. What makes them successful? Why are they successful? What attributes do they have that is similar? And what don't you want to do? So I had coaches that I didn't like, but they were my coach, so respect them and do what they say, but store it up there. I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
So when I came to Australia, it was, you're a player, but they needed someone to coach. So I said, "This is what I want to do." And
Awesome.
when I went to Newcastle in '79, I mean, almost every player was older than me, and they were all Newcastle residents. So I've been brought in, this young guy, which was a challenge because not only was I, kind of trying to mold into the team, I was also the coach of the team. But again, great for my experience, great for development of me as a coach. But when I went to Canberra, it was one of the most pleasing things ever. Is you take a team that had come 10th in the league,
Yeah.
you add one or two pieces, and then not only did we win the championship, but we just totally turned Canberra onto to basketball,
Yeah.
and that was so satisfying to say we did it.
Amazing. Now, being thrown into that at a young age, I imagine there was a heap of self-doubt. Like, how did you overcome the self-doubt around being in that role where you, like you said, you're coaching men who are older than you? You haven't exactly done it before. How did you manage that?
I mean, the main thing is you just stay at it and have confidence that you know what you're doing, and you back that up by doing research, by doing, I can still show you today every practice session I had. because I wrote them all down on cards and
Yeah.
show you what I did in 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84. The Kings,
Yeah.
uh, because I would take pride in the practice session, to make sure the team was motivated and learning and everything else. Um, but you just stay at it because that's what you believe in. And the difference in it was fascinating in Canberra because Johnny Warren was coaching the Canberra Arrows, or
Cosmos?
the Cosmos
Yeah.
at the time, and Don Ferner was coaching the Raiders. So I reached out to those two, who became pretty good mates, and we would get together on a regular occurrence and
Yeah.
talk about coaching and sport. And I said to Don at one stage, "Man, I don't know how you do it. You work your tail off all week. At halftime, you sit up in the stands watching the game. At halftime, you got 5 minutes with your players, and they're not
Yeah.
listening. They're tired and
Yeah.
getting ready for the second half. And then if they lose, it's your fault. It's like,
Yeah.
that's a tough gig. And the
Yeah.
same with football, with soccer. Is Johnny Warren's the same thing. Whereas in my game, in basketball, you have your hands on the wheel. You can call a timeout, you can call a play, you can sub somebody in, you can make a change. You are in control. So if you're
Yeah.
going down, you're going down because you don't know what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I always joke that you're a good coach because it's on the scoreboard. You're the one who lost, and you can't lie and you can't bullshit. It's it's up there. So those are the things that I always try to do is learn from as many others as I could, have confidence in what I believed in, listen to others, because the thing when I was in Sydney, when we had 10,000 assistant coaches every game, who weren't afraid to tell you what they thought, you listen. You might not react and you might not take it in, but you listen and say, okay, fair point. I'll put that in rather than resist and say, you idiot. What are you going on about?
Yeah. Yeah.
There were a lot of people that, especially in Sydney, like a Don Lane he loved coaching basketball. So he'd come to a lot of practices, throw out what he thought. Sometimes I'd say, good point. Sometimes I'd say no. And the deal is the guy coaching any team knows his players better than the media, better than the sponsors, better than the chairman, better than anybody. And so if he's making a call on a certain play or a certain player, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes hard to explain that, but
Yeah.
I've let very very good players go, um, because they just didn't. It's a little bit like my high school coach taught me. Their
Yeah.
attitude was changing, and it wasn't going to affect the whole club. So no, I'm not going to do that. I'll get rid of you or let you go and bring somebody else in.
Yeah. And you referenced that at the start when you talked about the Kings, when you said that they were ready just to get on the plane.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even the Kings, I let Dwayne McClain go. Now, Dwayne McClain, when we brought him in '91, he was like the Michael Jordan of Australia.
He was.
In the '92 season, he had his own shoe with Reebok. He's doing commercials for Coca-Cola, doing commercials for McDonald's, averaging 25, 30 points a game. He was a hero. And in his third year in '93, things were slipping, late for practice. I just could sense the love of the game, love of the Kings wasn't as strong as it was the year before.
Yeah.
And so at the end, and I kept telling him, mate, we got to do something to change this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the season, I just said, look, we're going to let you go. And most people you're crazy. This guy's, all everything. And I said, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Understand. But I brought in Leon Trimmingham, and within his first dunk, everybody
Yeah.
went, "Whoa, this guy can play."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you got to have the ability to replace somebody, and hopefully you can do it well.
Yeah, and I'm getting sort of tingles with memories of your hands as the coach promoter, as you described, even starting from those Shoalhaven days. Was we could go to that mezzanine level after the game, and we were there just about every week,
Yeah,
and you could talk to the players
yeah,
like magic.
because our players, we would do. It was interesting because you'd sign a player,
Yeah.
and you'd say, for instance, I'll pay you $100,000 to play, and I'll pay you $50,000 to do what we used to call P&D, promotion and development.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to do any promotions or schools or anything else, that's fine. We'll just pay you this. But if
Yeah.
you want both, we'll pay you. Now, why would you say no?
No brainer.
Um, but the promotions and development were the key to building the Kings, because we did like 500 school visits.
Yeah.
We did camps at every association for them to make money, not us. We promoted the game every chance we could. We used our sponsors like Coca-Cola and NEC and Reebok to promote us, promote basketball, but promote them. And so as we were building this all up, you could see the crowd start to come, and everybody start to get pumped about it all.
Yeah.
But the key for us was that our players were accessible, and I was accessible, and Mike Wroblewski was accessible. The key pieces of the organization, that if someone called us and said, "Can you come and do this?" Look, we'll try. We'll get a guy out there. We'll see what we can do. And so we then had, I think we gave away 2,000 autographed balls every year, to people who would call up and say, "Can I have something to raffle off?" Yeah, sure you can. Here. And we that was all part of the process. Um, and today, the thing that annoys me about today's world is, you know, you want me to sign an autograph? Are you kidding? How much you going to pay me?
Yeah.
What? Things that we're doing today, for whatever reason, just don't gel with the public.
No. But that's not to say that it can't change, and actually watch some of the coaches around the world now who are doing the best job are the ones who are actively engaging with the fan
Absolutely.
base and making it all about the fan base. I mean, it helps when one of them's an Aussie who's doing well in the EPL,
Absolutely.
um, but it's the same
So
principle, right?
refreshing. It's just so refreshing to see, these kind of coaches come along,
Yeah,
to break the system.
yeah,
We've gone so one way, and then you need the guy, but the difference is you need that coach to have the backing of the organization and the chairman and the board. So when I got involved in Blacktown City Football Club as chairman, I wouldn't say I'm a huge football knowledgeable person by any
yeah,
means,
yeah.
but when I met our coach, I knew right away, he's old school, no nonsense, knows what he's doing, credibility. I don't have to think at all about football. I don't need to tell him what I think because I don't know enough. enough. I'm dangerous if I do. Um, and so we have a great relationship because I just say, "You got the backing of the board, man. You're it. Do whatever you think needs to be done." And he's fantastic. But if I came in and said, "Who does this guy think he is?" I'm now in charge.
Yeah.
Make life for him a lot harder.
Yeah, and that's true leadership in whether it's in corporate or whether it's a sporting organization and anywhere. It's like when people try and control everything and micromanage, you're never going to get the best out of your people.
Absolutely.
And I love how you've applied that to coaching, because it's essentially what you're talking about there is as the uh, you're managing the place, but you're actually coaching them,
Yeah,
and you're
and because you believe in the product, and you're building that product. And I had 7 years coaching the Kings, and I loved it all. But that year that Dwayne, I thought, was drifting a little bit, in '93, we lost like 6 games in a row by a couple of points, and
mm,
Mike Wroblewski, who was extremely supportive, was losing it a little bit because he wanted to win.
yeah,
And we had one game where we lost. We were ahead by 10 or 12, and we lost the game. And he was hot. We got in the car park after the game, and he's he's not happy. And I said, Mike, I'm not a bad coach overnight. I know what I'm doing.
yeah.
I'll fix it. And it's just part of the game. I mean, it's the ball bounced that way instead of in. Um, Now, was I upset? Was I, a little bit nervous? Yeah, absolutely. But I knew what I was doing, and I knew my players, and I knew my team, so I knew we could fix it.
Now, were you involved at the club when they finally broke through and won their first title?
Well, what happened is I brought them back, or we bought them in 2000, and I bought them with a bunch of other. It wasn't my money by any means, but Macquarie Bank and a lot of individuals. Um, And in that third year, 2002 season, Brett Brown came to me and said, "Look, I've got an offer to go in the NBA with Popovich. I don't want to turn it down."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, obviously." And
Yeah.
he said, "But I've talked to Brian, and Brian's interested." And I knew Brian pretty well, so because we coached against each other, and so I called him up and said, "Hey, would you come up, and take over
Mhm.
the team?" And so we agreed, and he came up and won that title in that first year. Now, I had we had gone through a bit of a me and the board financially, and we went into administration, came back out of it, and so I wasn't happy with where their mindset was, and I just so halfway through the season, I just said, "Look, it's time for me to go. So and so will take over, and Brian's your coach." And so they won the title, so I wasn't involved in that, but I helped get Brian there. But
Yeah. Yeah.
everything was set up, ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. You still must have taken great pride in everything you'd put in place to allow that to happen, though.
Absolutely. I mean, I the 7 years I was there as the coach
Yeah.
and the marketer. I mean, we averaged about $1 million profit every year
Oh,
over
wow.
those 7 years, and there's not a lot of clubs making money today.
No.
So we were full. We were selling the game. We were, in the community, and we were profitable. But we never talked about making money, because that was just a byproduct of filling your stadium up. And
Yeah.
it's also the fact that I was in Sydney, where the corporate dollar is, 100 times bigger than Canberra or Hobart or
Yeah.
Cairns or Wollongong. So
Yeah.
we had 80 corporate boxes. The average price was 25 grand. You do the sums, those $2 million right off the bat. You get 10,000 people every game. Keep your ticket price low so everybody comes in, put on a good show, and everything works. And so when the Kings were winning 3 championships in a row, financially there was a disaster, because they
Really?
stopped doing all the things that we were doing in the community and just expected everything to just bubble along. Well, it wasn't that wasn't the case, because in like the late 90s to early 2000s, teams were going broke. Teams were spending money they shouldn't have spent on players that you kind of shake your head and go, "Why are you spending that kind of money?
Yeah.
Where else is that player going to go?"
Yeah.
Uh, and we can't afford it anyway. So teams were spending money they didn't have based on ego. And so it was almost like every year another team would fall over, and that was just disastrous for the league.
Yeah, and even those championship years, I remember what basketball wasn't anywhere near at the heights it had been in the 90s. I was in the courtside box because it was at Fox Sports, and just to reflect it, there wasn't a heap of people that wanted to go.
No,
So
that's
I'd
true.
just go, "Oh, I'm happy to go." Like, I've been on this train for a while. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's fantastic.
It
That
was,
gave
see, and I ask a lot of people, because obviously everywhere I go, people remember those years because we were so hot and so community minded. So I say, have you gone back to a game? No, and I said, why not? Well, it's different. Now I read a story that the new chairman of the NBL came out and said, "I'm tired of hearing about the glory days. We're in the glory days now. That we're getting crowds, we're getting TV ratings, and you know, and that's true. I mean, you got to look at the Kings right now, getting 12, 13, 14, 17,000 to a game. Unbelievable, fantastic for the game. But it's not the same because you're not doing the same community work. You're not reaching out to the people. And I would question, I'd almost say to the CEO of the NBL, when a team averages $1 million profit every year for 7 years, crow all you want, because that's a mark of a business success as well as a basketball success.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I got back out there this year, took the family out, and it's a fantastic production. But it
They
is
do a great job.
interesting that you say that it's not engaging the community, and basketball at grassroots is pretty strong. Like, it's fast growing. There's a lot of kids that play in it. In my area in particular, there's not enough courts,
Yeah,
So imagine what would be possible if they could join those dots and actually engage.
absolutely. I mean, you put 20 more courts at Hills, they'd fill it.
Yeah,
Put 20 courts in Blacktown, they'd fill it. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
and I think the game plan for the league at the moment, having seen a couple of games myself in the last few years, is the game plan is we have to reinvigorate the people, the community, and so the crowds are very young. But that's exactly what happened in the '90s. We were educating young people by going to schools.
yeah,
When Dean Uthoff walked into a primary school, what's the little what's the little 8-year-old gonna do? Holy dooly, this guy's
yeah,
big. You want me
yeah,
to go to a game? Sure, I'll go. I'll go home and tell mom and dad.
yeah,
But they were impressive, or
yeah,
any of our American players, same thing. So I think their game plan is to get back to making it accessible for young people. They're coming to the games. They're your next generation of fans and supporters, and it's working. They got good corporate support. So absolutely, the game is just flowing at the junior level. But then you take the Boomers and Opals. They're world class. The Boomers have, Australia has what, 10, 12 guys in the NBA.
at least, yeah,
WNBA is littered with 30 players from Australia. So
yeah,
we're good. We're very good, and a lot of that goes back to starting it in the 80s and 90s with the leagues and the women's men's and women's league, but also the community approach and also the coaching. So a lot of the coaches back then were doing a lot of work in educating coaches. Um, I'm not when I got involved in an association here in Sydney. I'm not sure that's an emphasis that is being looked at. It's a negative in my view because if you don't have coaches, you don't have my grandson's being coached by you know my daughter
yeah,
who doesn't know how to coach. No offense to my daughter.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, so we need more people just to understand how the basics of coaching.
Yeah, particularly from what you said at the start around the psychology of it, the motivational side, and having them focus on the things that are important as a person, which
Yeah,
your coach, as you said, taught you in no uncertain terms.
yeah.
I'm curious about the swimming part. Like, how good a swimmer were you? Like, is it something that you look back and go, maybe I could have actually done something there? Or was it
Well,
more
that
the
was
impact?
my main when I was like 8 to 14, 15. That was my main sport. Because I was a little guy. Even when I was a freshman in high school, which is like year 9, I was 5'3" and weighed about 50 pounds. I was a little. I loved basketball, but I was a little guy.
Yeah.
But I had a pretty good motor, so I was a 1,500-meter swimmer. Murray Rose was my hero,
Oh, wow.
and when I came to Australia and met him, I was like, wow, and I wanted to be a swimmer. I wanted to go to the Olympics. I was decent, but then I started to think about college and universities and scholarships. And back in the '70s, there weren't a lot of swimming scholarships. So I thought, okay, basketball is going to be. I started to grow, which was, influential.
Yeah.
And so I gave up swimming. When I was a freshman in high school, I was on the varsity swimming team, and you know was one of the main players, and got my varsity degree or whatever they called it, at the time. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, walking around school like I'm pretty good, but I was a little shit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
thankfully, I grew, and my grandson is almost exactly the same. He's a little tiny guy. He's got a good motor,
Yeah.
so it'll come good when he gets a little bit of size to him.
That's good. I love that you had the Australian connection already. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, and this amazes me. I went one night by myself to watch a movie at the cinema
yeah.
called Walkabout. Now,
Interesting.
why I went to watch this movie, I have no idea because I had no inkling about Australia.
Yeah.
Um, and so I went to watch this movie, and I went, "Wow, that's still one of my all-time favorites." And when the fellow came to when Guy Rogers came to recruit a big guy, and he's in my apartment talking about Australia. It still didn't equate,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, movie to the country. And I kind of said, where's Australia again?
The,
uh,
the curiosity was already there, though, in the
it's
back of
starting
the
to come up,
subconscious.
and I called my parents up. I said, I'm going pro in Australia. They go, "Where's Australia?" I go, "I'll only be there for a year or two. Don't worry, I'll come back." And 48 years later, I'm still here. I am.
Fantastic. I imagine that the swimming part. Uh, I'm guessing you're an extrovert, right? Just from the journey that you've been here and the promotion and so on.
Yeah.
Basketball must have appealed from that perspective too, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, swimming was a great discipline. You get up at 5 in the morning, you go to practice, and super disciplined. So you learn that's important in any sport. Then you're in a meet and no one cares, and but then you go to a basketball game and you go, whoa, this is. I played baseball and football as well, like every young kid did, but basketball had this appeal that I could make myself better because all it took was the individual work. So if I could become a Pete Maravich ball handling, and I could think the game out. So as a point guard, I could make other players better. I thought,
Yeah,
if I can make myself better, and that's exactly what happened. That's what I did. And between my junior and senior in high school, it just exploded. And then university was great. And then coming here, honestly, I was coming for a year, maybe two, because I wanted to coach university basketball in America.
yeah,
But then when the league started in '79, and I looked around and I thought, well, hold on, this is not bad. And go a few more years ahead, and I'm in Sydney with the Kings, and every game's live television. We're playing once a week, maybe twice, 10,500 every game. You're the toast of the town. It's like it's like coaching in the NBA, but you're not playing 5 times a week.
nice.
Um, and you got players that are hungry and want to
Yeah,
play.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I thought, well, why would I ever want to go back to the U.S. when I have everything going here?
Did you
And
end
then it
up?
became coaching was, coaching led to administration, especially when Mike came to me and said, I want to get out. Why don't you buy it? Put some people together, and you know, you can have it for a price. Mind you.
I bet.
uh, but so we bought it, and that started my real administration year. So when I put a team in Singapore to play in the league, the Singapore Slingers, I mean, that was like unbelievably different and
Yeah,
big and difficult, and you name it. It was like wow. But a great experience. And still to this day, it's the only professional sports team in Singapore. Then we built a
wow.
league for them to play in, the ASEAN Basketball League. Rather than the difficulty in Singapore is I had 8 Australians and 2 Americans on my team, and I had Singapore on my chest, and the government was supplying a lot of money for me to do this.
Yeah,
And one day they said, "Where's our player? Where's our guy?" Oh, we're learning. He's learning. He's down
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
So we developed our own league, and that then within 2 or 3 years, every player was full time representing their country.
Amazing, and it's huge in Philippines, isn't it?
Oh
Basketball.
yeah, Philippines is just crazy. Um,
Um, you ever think like when you look back at moments? So I know I do this too, and you think, why did I even do that? Like, why did you go watch that movie? But there's some things are just meant to be.
Absolutely. I mean, I do this all the time,
Yeah,
and a lot of it is you have an open mind.
yeah,
Your mind is inquisitive. Your mind is wants to explore. And when you're a coach, if you don't do that, you're not going to be very good. So you're always trying to expand and see what happens. And someone said to me the other day, now I've been involved with baseball, with lawn bowls, with gymnastics, with speedway, football now, ice hockey, uh, And they go, why are you doing that? Well, one, I grew up in America where sport is sport. It's not, you're not pigeonholed to do one thing. You're a
Yeah.
sports person. But two, they all have ingredients that have potential to make them successful. So, you only go around once. And my mantra is that first game I played at Shoalhaven, some guy yelled out from the stands, "Have a go." He actually said, "Have a go, you mug." And and I thought, "Have a go." Wow, that's me. That's a I'm willing to get in and have a go. And so now with the Australian Ice Hockey League, it's got all the ingredients except for venues, rinks. Okay, yeah, let's try and solve that one. And in the meantime, let's build the league. And the quality of the product is good enough that people are going to go and they're going to go, wow, just like I did.
Yeah.
My first game last year, I went to see. I was curious to see if we knew how to skate.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
do we know how to skate? And I go to the game and I'm going, whoa, hey, yeah, we definitely do. I mean, all these
Good.
guys are players.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, so now, we have a chance.
Amazing. Amazing. So good. What you've had sports had such a impact on your life. Could you bring it down to one area that's had the biggest positive impact for you in terms of
Um,
who you are?
that have a go mentality is probably the biggest thing in my head because I came here for a year or two. I think we were talking before. I've been an Australia Day ambassador for 28 years, and yet every time I go out to represent the government to say how good it is to be an Aussie, they go, who brought the Yank? Um, and so no matter what, I'm still not fighting for acceptance, but it's still never 100%. And the same with the sport of basketball. It's still as good as it is. It's still not AFL. It's still not rugby league. It's still not rugby union. It's still not cricket. It's
Yeah.
still not even netball, which are core sports for this country through history. And now, is basketball making inroads? Absolutely. Is football making inroads? Absolutely. The Matildas, you know, it just broke the glass ceiling. I mean,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
not only women's sport, but just football.
Yeah.
So things are changing, but that kind of what sport has taught me is that discipline and that hunger to learn, to keep going forward. That you're going to have setbacks, and when I see coaches on the sideline and they're up and down, like highs and lows, and yelling at the refs and down to here, I go, that team is going to be like that. If I was like that, my team's going to be like that. But if I just kind of go along, ripples up and down, but stay even keeled, my team should stay even keeled. The people
Yeah.
around me should stay even keeled.
Love it.
Now that's my nature. Do I get upset? Do I fly off the handle? Absolutely. But when I do, I think you're wrong, or I think, someone's made a mistake. So I need to make a point. But that's my nature anyway. I'm not a high and low kind of person. I just want to, build it. Get impatient a lot of times, but that's
Yeah, I can relate.
yeah.
I love how you've talked about those transferable skills that sport gives you that you're able to take into other areas. And you've mentioned discipline a few times. How important has discipline been for you in business and also personal life? Because you look like you're fit.
No. I wear bigger shirts. I mean, I'm decent. I'm okay, but I don't do a lot anymore that I used to. But that discipline is something that when I got into business. Like I was a coach,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, I'm the executive director of the Sydney Kings. Okay, here we go.
yeah,
Now, did I make mistakes? Yeah, because it was not. I didn't have a business degree or a PhD in economics or anything, But
yeah,
I understand black and red, and I understand where I want to head and how to avoid going down.
yeah,
But that was a huge learning curve for me. Um, and then I had 3 years working for the Australian Cancer Research Foundation, or 2 years. And I love that because my Skip Mohat died of cancer. My sister died of breast cancer. My business partner with when we built a basketball sports line died of cancer. So I had 5 really close people, all different cancers.
Yeah.
And so the CEO of the Australian Cancer Research Foundation used to be the president of Basketball Australia, a good mate of mine, Basketball New South Wales, sorry. And so he said, "Can you, help me with a project?" Yep. He said, "Why don't you take it on and build the marketing of our organization?" Yeah. So that's totally different. Had nothing to do with sport, but yet you can intertwine sport, and I can knock on almost any door because people would say, "Oh, Bob called me. I wonder what he wants."
Yeah.
Uh, they still say no, but they'll accept the meeting
Yeah. Wow.
because if he believes in it, it must be worth looking at. And that's the same with when I got involved with baseball, the Sydney Blue Sox, and people would say, "You're the basketball guy. Why are you involved with baseball?" And I'd say, "Well, did you know that we have 30 guys playing in the pros? Did you know, you know, the Dodgers are coming out next year? Did you know Major League Baseball owned the league?" No. Okay, well that's why.
Yeah.
Same with ice hockey. "Well, why are
Yeah.
you doing ice hockey? Are you kidding me?" And I go, "Yeah. Do you realize, we have players in the NHL, and the NHL is coming down here to play, and all of a sudden people start to say, well, okay, I'll give it a look. And if they do what I did and have a look, you're going to go, wow, this is pretty good."
So good. You mentioned that just then. It's like, well, if Bob believes in it, you must have such a strength in your conviction of what you believe in that you're able to get people to buy in really quickly. And I think that's so important in life,
Hmm,
when finding something, one, that you believe in, and two, that having the conviction to be able to back yourself. What
that's
advice could you give to the listeners on how they could find that for their life?
it's interesting. I did something for Paul Ramsey Foundation last week, and the chairman was on my table, and he said exactly what you just said. How do you assess something? Because he's seen what I've done, and
Yeah.
how do you assess something that you think that could be successful, or how do you assess whether you get involved or not? And I said to him, you look at the pros and cons. I always have a whiteboard in my head, and down the middle is a line that says pros and cons. um, what can you do with those pros? Can you accentuate them, build them? How many of the cons can you shift over to the pro side? And the ones you can't, how damaging will they be to what you want to build? So
Yeah.
you kind of assess it on that basis. Then you say, do I like it? Because I'm an average punter.
Yeah.
I love sport. So, do I like it? ACRF, why would I take it on? Because I believe in it. So you say, yeah, I think that's something worth doing. So that's kind of what I do, and then it's a matter of, once you believe in you say, if I sell it. Here's a good example. When I came to coach the Kings, I had been in Newcastle and Canberra, so I knew it could own the town. I, I
Yeah.
I just knew because also Brisbane was doing it, Perth was doing it, Melbourne was doing it. Sydney was lagging behind because it's a big city,
Yeah.
and so I knew when I got there that you could build this up. And everybody I talked to, sponsors, media, people in schools, whoever, you might not you might not like it, but you'll at least listen because you're so that passion comes across.
Yeah.
And if I believe in it and you go to a game and you say, "Oh, this is terrible," um, you know, okay, that's your call. But what I did to a lot of people is they'd say, "Oh, I'm not a basketballer. I don't like basketball." And I'd say, "Well, do you like entertainment?" "Oh, yeah." I said, "Well, you
Yeah.
come to the game, you'll be entertained. And
Yeah.
if you don't like the game, that's fine." So what would happen is people would come to a game, like you got into it, so you'd come on a regular basis. A lot
Yeah.
of people say, I went and I had a lot of fun. It was good fun, but it's not my game. But the key is they don't go talk to their friends and mates and associates and say, "God, I went to a Kings game that night. God, what a shit night. It was terrible. They charged this, that." No,
Mm.
they go and say, "Well, I'm not a basketball person, but boy, it was fun." And so all of a sudden, most of our crowd were coming not to watch us, shoot threes, watch
Yeah.
Dame Keo 3-0 Keo. They were coming to be entertained. And in many ways, a lot of the people coming to the games today for the Kings are coming to be entertained. They're looking up at
Um,
that video board,
yeah.
see if they're on the screen rather than, who shot the last three.
So good. Interestingly, I wasn't a basketball person, but around that time I started playing. So it just shows, right, the impact of a
Yeah.
sport that does it well. And if you can connect to people at a deeper level, beyond that surface level, then you'll engage them. And that's where you can actually start making change, not just to a sporting landscape, but a community landscape, right?
Biggest disappointment in Sydney or New South Wales is we didn't build basketball courts when we should have.
Yeah, too late.
Um, Melbourne, has 16 court facilities that are full,
Yeah,
lots of them. Whereas, here in Sydney, Hills has 6 courts. They put 26 courts in there, they'd fill it up. We just don't
yeah.
have, and it's expensive and
Isn't that just infrastructure in New South Wales, though? We'll build it 5 years after it was needed, and whatever
yeah,
we build will already be 15 years out of date. It's just
yeah,
it just happens again and again with all
yeah.
of it.
I mean, it's like ice rinks. There was an ice rink in Blacktown. The land got sold for development. Penrith got sold for development. Norwest got sold for development. Now you have Macquarie and one other. MacArthur, the roof caved in, so they're fixing that. So you got
Yeah,
one rink basically in all of Sydney. Now I'm trying to build one in Blacktown, like a
yeah,
dual rink, with seating for 3 or 4 thousand. Because the Ice Dogs, if they were playing in Blacktown like they used to, they'll fill it.
yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and the product is good. I mean, you're indoors. It's music. It's like rugby league on ice. It's fast. It's physical.
Yeah,
And for Aussies, like they'll love it once they get
yeah,
to see it. But we need facilities. So that infrastructure piece, hopefully, New South Wales thinks about it and helps us out.
yeah. Absolutely. Now, you've created a substantial legacy through your own journey through sport. I usually ask people around this, around the impact sport can have. You've already seen it and you've lived it. What else do you know is possible for the impact that sport, the positive impact that sport can have if it's done right?
The one thing that I was at a function for Blacktown Council 6 months ago, and a fellow came in to give a presentation on developing the Blacktown City Games. And he's with a company called Super Six. And so I'm listening to this fellow, and I was getting fascinated because he's talking about his whole thing is behavioral. It's now this guy was the strength and conditioning coach for the Canberra Raiders, Penrith Panthers, uh, Crusaders down in New Zealand, Auckland Warriors.
Oh,
He's one
this
of
is Carl
Carl Jennings.
Carl Jennings. Yeah,
Carl Jennings, one of the best in the business, and was at the top of his game, doing everything he wanted to do, and built for 25 years, and had a change in life experience, saving somebody from a fire.
I actually interviewed him for my previous podcast, so I'll have to make sure I get the link for that
Carl's
one in a
story
minute.
is amazing, but the more
Amazing.
important thing is he started to tell me about how he came to Super Six.
Yep,
And he'd been work. Luke Lewis is part of his association, Petro
yep,
Civonicevio, Ruben Wiki. These are guys he all coached,
yep,
so they believe. So he put together. He said, "What makes a good athlete? What makes someone successful? Because they all have physical attributes. I mean, you can't be good at something unless you have the physical side. But
yeah,
what makes them exceptional?" And so he went through like 20 behaviors that are critical. And he started to eliminate. He got down to 6. He said, I can't eliminate anymore. So it's Super Six. So it's a behavioral mechanism. So when he started talking to me about what he does at his gym, He's got a gym. He does school programs. He does camps. He does the Blacktown City Games now. And I looked at him and said, this is what is needed in society today, because he will take, and the deputy mayor of Blacktown, a number of key people have sent their young boys or girls to him for training,
Yep.
and he's just transformed them. Because, as you know, as a coach, you have a lot more authority than a parent
Yes.
or even a teacher nowadays. I mean, teachers used to have that authority. Now they're kind of getting eroded with all the junk
Yep.
we go on with.
Yep.
So when a coach, but a coach is a coach. You want to play for me? You
Yep.
want to learn? This is how you do it. And so I became his chairman because I believe you can take this process, this kind of business plan, and take it to any council in Australia, because every council is in the same boat, where discipline is lacking,
Yep.
personal discipline is lacking, um, because we've let it kind of gone way over here,
Yeah.
and you need to bring it back. But how do you do that? Now sport does that, because you
Does.
can't hide. You can't be a good sports person if you don't know discipline. And then we said, with Carl, I said, Carl, we can't clone you. You're very. I've never met anybody like you personally, but so we can't clone you. But if we set up a franchise of Super Six, take the Super Six Blacktown model and put it in Albury, I want to go to someone like Lauren Jackson, who understands the discipline, the fight, all the attributes it takes to be a successful athlete, and let her have that franchise in Albury. This is the model. This is how it does, and basically train. And I heard Kieran Perkins speak, and he said, after I finished swimming, I was depressed. What do I do? I heard
Yeah.
Kathy Freeman speak. No one talks to me anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be like, ask my opinion on everything. Now it's like,
Yeah.
oh. So you have all these people who were excelled, and we're not using them. We're not. So Super Six can actually take them on board, give them their own business model, give them their own, you know, enthusiasm to do something again
Yeah. Love
with
it.
something they know, and you're helping kids in society. So that's my next goal, is to try and take that, because I see my grandkids now, and they're good kids, but they need a little more discipline, and they need more direction that says, unless you do this, you're not going to get to there. And we've lost that a bit. Oh, we've lost it. I mean, I think we
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
change it.
Yeah. Well said. What you've described there is what you do as a sports coach too, right? Is that you set people up to win.
Absolutely, absolutely. You don't tell them how to do it. You guide them. And I always used to say, when I was coaching, I can't go on the floor and play. So I need my team to understand and believe in the process of how we're going to play, and stick to that. Now, as a basketball coach, you can make adjustments and change things because it's the nature of the game.
Yeah.
But through the week is when you're educating your players to say, this is how we're going to play. Thankfully, when I was in Canberra, I had a Phil Smythe, who was like a second assistant coach. I mean, his nickname was the General, because he'd look over, what do you think? Or he'd just say, we should do this. Yep, go for it.
Yep.
Because he understood the culture we were developing, the culture of how we were playing. Once you get to that, your players play because they want to do it, rather than you're telling them to do that. And that's what we're failing in business. We're telling people how to do it, rather than educating them to say, do they want to do it? And in most cases, people don't want to do it. They're doing it to earn a buck, but it's not
Yeah.
it's not satisfying.
So good. I appreciate the time you've given me, Bob. Do you have time if I ask you one more question?
Sure.
Good man.
Yeah.
You've ticked off one of them. I was going to ask you about Super Six, but you've answered that without any prompting, so that's good. That place of getting in the zone, and you may have experienced it as a player, but I imagine you've experienced it far more being a coach or in business. Can you think of an example and maybe some of the learnings from that?
When I was coaching the Cannons, it was a ride. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we went from dropping the curtain, centering the court, filling it up. We had our own TV program. So it was going well. And when we won the title in '83 and flew back to Canberra, it was like, wow, so many positives. So the next year, we're back at it again, which is the part of any season. You can win, but then okay, now you got to do it again. How are you going to do it?
Yeah.
So you winning back to back is hard because you have to keep everybody in line and understanding and level headed and so we won the second title in Melbourne, and I knew immediately when we won because it was still a tight game.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go into the locker room by myself and not talk to anybody, not think of anybody, not get all excited or anything else because in my head it was so satisfying that we had done it. But then immediately my thought was, oh shit, now we got to do it 3 times in a row because that's the expectation
Yeah.
uh, of me, of everybody around it. And so you just want to take a deep breath and say, okay, let me savor this for by myself.
Yeah.
And my wife was there as well, and but she said, where'd he go? Let me just savor this and figure it out. So then I have my own game plan in my head and we'll hit next year, with a fresh set of eyes, but with a different attitude. Um, because if I didn't do that, if I run and jumped up and down and got drunk and did all those things, I failed myself in that moment.
Love it. So good. Uh, Bob, such an honor to have you back and being able to interview you and hearing just how far you've come since all those, well, it's probably 29 years ago now. I
Yeah, yeah,
really appreciate it. And I love how these things just sort of fall in your lap. Someone connected with me. I noticed that they had a post that had you in there,
yeah.
and and I was like, oh, okay, let's do this. And you were more than happy to, and I really appreciate that. And thank you
I
for sharing
appreciate
that.
what you're doing, and it's fun because when people said, how did you get involved with baseball? I said, they asked me, how'd you get involved with ice hockey? I said, the chairman was after me for 5 years. Finally, I said, okay, I'll go to a game. So I went to a game and I went, whoa, this is, you could do something with this. A lot of it is when people ask, I mean, but I also say, if Peter V'landys came to me tomorrow and said, I'll pay you $5 million to run rugby league in Australia, I'd say no, because I can't, it's not my thing. It's not,
Yeah, yeah,
you're way advanced. You guys are you're doing a fantastic job. But regardless, I couldn't take on that job because it's not me and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not my game or it's not, what I want to do. So I know myself well enough that I'm only going to take things on where I think that's got a chance. I'll get in and have a go and see what happens. And my philosophy in life is you only go around once, so don't waste it. Get in and have a go.
Wow, and what a great way to finish! Because to me, that's just one of the best lessons you could ever learn. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing your time and your wisdom. Thank you so much, Bob.
Get on you in anytime.
Cheers. Key lesson from that chat with Bob Turner for me was the importance of community engagement. Now, whether you are at a community level, whether it's local sport, or whether you are working for an elite sporting organization, the same message applies. If you can engage the community, if you can get everyone pulling in the same direction, then magic happens. So I can remember being part of those Sydney Kings days that he talked about as part of the community. It's also a big part of what I do now when I'm working with those community level clubs, the importance of engaging people. The best organizations in the world do it. I really love that. Thank you, Bob, for sharing that. Also, a reminder, please subscribe, or depending on the platform, follow the podcast so you can help me reach as many people as possible. And if you like an episode yet, please share it with a friend that you know would enjoy it. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.